Hi everybody, welcome to the second lesson for Business Management 3-4. So today we're going to be looking at the second half of the content for the first area study for the course. So in this video we'll address the characteristics of stakeholders, conflicts between stakeholders, and our management styles and skills. So the first part of this video is looking at stakeholders. So stakeholders have a vested interest into the business's performance. What that means is that they are either indirectly or directly affected by the business. And so they want the business to either perform well, or for some stakeholders, they want the business to perform poorly. The second important thing for this little dot point is an introduction into corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is something that will come up again and again throughout the course. So it's good to have a solid grasp of it by the end of this video. Essentially, corporate social responsibility is going above and beyond your legal obligations and making sure that the business is acting honestly and ethically by reducing the impact of the business on the environment and also on the community. So ways that the business could act corporate socially responsible is by implementing solar panels to reduce carbon emissions, or by hiring disadvantaged youth to address issues of employment. There are a range of different ways of achieving CSR. And so now we're going to look at some in relation to stakeholders. But first we need to have a good definition of each of the different types of stakeholders. These are the main stakeholders that we'll look at throughout the course. And so the first one is your shareholders. So we already looked at this a bit in the first video, but shareholders essentially just invest into the business. And so they own a share of the business, which entitles them to a percentage of the business profits, which we call dividends. The next type of stakeholder that we need to know is our managers. So managers are responsible for making decisions which they believe are in the business's best interests to achieve the business's objectives. Next, we have our competitors, who are rival businesses that operate in the same industry. So these are one of those stakeholders that are going to want the business to perform kind of poorly, because if your competitor performs poorly, that means that your market share is likely to increase. An example of competitors would be Coles and Woolworths. Another type of key stakeholder is your suppliers. So suppliers provide materials and resources to the business which are used in production. So if you're making t-shirts, you might source inputs from a supplier for cotton or for fabric dyes. Next is your customers, who purchase the goods and services and provide the business with money. And finally, your employees. Employees work in the business in exchange for payment and also fair working conditions. So let's start with our employees. So with each of our stakeholders, it's good to get into the habit of having a definition of what they are, having an idea of what they want. So what is their interest in the business, and also having a brief way the business can implement CSR in relation to that stakeholder. So starting with employees. Employees work in the business in exchange for payment, and their main interest is to receive fair pay and fair working conditions. In relation to CSR, the business can go above and beyond what they're legally required to do by providing the employee with better entitlements. That might be better pay than what's legally required, better working conditions than what's legally required. That might mean more flexible working hours or more holiday leave. And so that's one way that the business can implement CSR in relation to their employees. Next, we have our managers. So managers are responsible for making decisions within the business to achieve business objectives. The manager's main interest in the business is to ensure that the business remains profitable, because if the business doesn't remain profitable, it's likely to close down. As well as having the business's interests at heart, they're also going to have some self-interest as well. So as well as that, the manager wants to receive fair payment for their work in the business and also have some job security, meaning that they know they're going to have their job for a certain period of time and they're not worried about being fired and that kind of thing. So one way the business can implement corporate social responsible practices in relation to managers is when the manager makes decisions, they need to consider the impact upon all stakeholders. So if the business wants to change their operations and create a factory overseas and move their factory from Australia to China, what's going to be the impact of that on their employees, what's going to be the impact of that on their customers, on their suppliers, and work out whether it's actually worthwhile for the business. The next type of stakeholder that we need to know is a shareholder. So as we said before, shareholders invest into the business and then own a share of the business, which means that they're entitled to dividends, which are a percentage of the business's profit. So the main interest of a shareholder is to gain a high return on their investment. So the greater the business's profit, the greater the amount the shareholder receives through dividends. One way that the business can implement corporate social responsible practices in regards to their shareholders is to ensure that the shareholders are provided with all information regarding the business. So there are legal requirements as to what the business has to share with their shareholders and what information has to be provided to them before they invest into the business and once they own shares. But the business can do more to ensure that their shareholders are involved in decisions and have more of a say. The next stakeholder is a supplier. So as we said before, suppliers provide materials and resources to the business, which are then used in production. Suppliers want to gain long-term and reliable businesses to deal with. And so when implementing corporate social responsible practices, the business can ensure that suppliers that they're operating and dealing with use ethical labor practices. So we call it a code of conduct. Businesses can make sure that their suppliers don't use child labor or don't use exploitation of workers. Because by doing that, their operations are harming the international community and workers overseas and that kind of thing. So that's something that's really, really important to think about. The next one is customers. So customers purchase goods and services. A customer's main interest is to buy high quality products that are fairly priced. So one way that the business can implement corporate social responsible practices in relation to their customers is to ensure that the goods are actually fit for use. And so they may need to do that by providing better warranty and returns policies than what's required by law. So by law, it might say that after 14 days, you can't get a warranty, but the business might extend that for a month, or they might extend that for 6 weeks to give people more of an opportunity. So that's all of the kind of introductory things, going through each stakeholder and outlining their interests within the business. What the main part of this dot point is about is outlining potential conflicts between stakeholders. And this is definitely a question that will come up on SACs and potentially exams. So the question might ask, outline one conflict between two key stakeholders. The tricky thing is with this question is how to go about it. Usually they're about a 4 or 6 mark question. What I've done here for you is I've given you a really good structure to go through. So what we first want to do is outline the interests and define the actual stakeholder for the first one. So you want to define who they are and outline their interest. So for example here, in the example, we've got customers. So customers purchase goods and services. Customers want high quality goods and they want to pay for products that are a fair price. Then we go on to our second stakeholder. So our second stakeholder, we do the same thing, define and outline their interest. Here we have the manager. So a manager wants the business to remain profitable and the manager makes decisions which are in the business's best interest to achieve business objectives. Now the hard part is, and this is probably worth about half the marks, we want to explain why those two interests might be in conflict. So if customers want high quality goods and managers want the business to remain profitable, it might propose some sort of issue, because if the business was to provide higher quality goods, it might increase the business's expenses, and that may mean that the business is no longer profitable, which then means that the manager isn't achieving their interests because the business is no longer profitable. So that's one good way of structuring your answer in relation to this dot point, and there's another practice question like this in the questions which go along with this video. The last section of this video is about management styles and skills, and it's the final few dot points of this area study. So management styles are the way in which a manager makes decisions and communicates with their employees. There are 5 different management styles that you need to know, and we'll go through each one in some detail now. The first one is an autocratic management style. So autocratic management style is where the manager makes all decisions within the business and has full control over decisions without any employee's input. So we call this a centralized decision making because it's central to the management. It's not delegated to employees. Employees have no input. So it's centralized in management. We also call it top-down communication because if you have employees here and employees below them in the hierarchy, the communication is coming from the manager to the employee telling them what to do. So it's top-down to employees. There's no way for the employees to communicate back up to their employer. The benefit of having an autocratic management style is that decisions are made very, very quickly, and they're also made by the experienced manager who, is knowledgeable about the business and has a better idea of the business's interests and objectives. The issue with autocratic management style is that it reduces employees' motivation because they're not able to put forward their ideas and they're not able to express their concerns and what they want in the business. And being told what to do by their manager can make them resentful of the business. But an autocratic management style is well suited to an urgent situation. So in situations where there's a fire or some sort of emergency, like with COVID, that decisions need to be made overnight. And also in situations where employees are not highly skilled. So it might be in a restaurant, is it suitable for waitresses to be making decisions about the management of a restaurant? Maybe not. Maybe they need to be told what to do by the experienced manager who's more experienced with the business side of things. Next, we move on to our persuasive management style. So persuasive management style is when the manager makes all decisions, but they explain the reasons why the decision has been made to the employee to gain their support. So they're trying to convince them to support it. An autocratic management style is different to this because autocratic, they just tell them what to do. They don't tell them any reasons for it. Whereas here with persuasive, they're explaining their justifications for the decision. And that's slightly better for gaining employee support and slightly better for motivating employees. So again, this is centralized decision making because the manager is making all decisions. And again, it's top down because the communication is coming from the employer to the employees telling them what to do. Again, because the manager makes decisions, the decisions are made quite quickly and by that experienced manager. And it also is slightly better than autocratic, as we said before, because employees might be slightly more motivated and likely to support it because they're explained of the reasons behind the change. But again, it may be a weakness of a persuasive management style is that, again, employees aren't able to express their concerns and therefore it might demotivate them. Next, we move on to consultative management styles. So consultative management styles is where the manager asks for employees' opinions first, and then they make the final decision. They don't have to use the employees' ideas, but they can. Again, this is a centralized decision making because the manager is ultimately making the final decision. It's centralized to the manager. Whilst the employees can give some input and some ideas, the manager decides whether or not to take those ideas. This, however, uses two-way communication because the employees can communicate to their employer and explain what they want and express their ideas. And then after that, the manager tells the employees what their decision is. So this is better because it improves the working relationships between the employee and the employers, which improves the corporate culture and also motivates employees because employees will feel like their decisions and their ideas and opinions are being considered in decisions, and ultimately they feel like they're having some input into decisions in the business. Also, it's good because at the end of the day, the manager does maintain control over the decisions. And so that means that it's made by an experienced individual, but at the same time, more ideas and more perspectives are being put forward, which can actually lead to better decisions in the long run. A weakness is, though, that it is more time consuming because the employees need to put forward their ideas first. And another issue with it is that employees might be demotivated if they put forward an idea which they believe is really, really good, but the manager just doesn't decide to go ahead with it. So a consultative management style is best suited to situations where there's a bit of time, it's not, an urgent situation, and also where employees are experienced into business and the management of the business. The next management style is participative management style. So this is when managers and employees make decisions as a team. So we call this decentralized decision making. This is the first one that we've been through so far that has decentralized decision making, which is where the employees actually are able to make decisions. And again, there's two-way communication because the employees can express their concerns and the managers will talk back and give ideas, and then together they make a decision. So there's two-way communication. The main benefit of a participative management style is that it creates a sense of teamwork and collaboration and respect between employees and employers. And this improves the culture and also motivation of employees. So it's really, really positive. The issue with the participative management style, though, is that it is very time consuming and it can cause conflict if employees are unable to agree with their employer, which may in the long run reduce corporate culture. Again, this is well suited to situations that have more time and aren't urgent, and also situations that directly affect employees, such as large changes to the business, because where employees are going to be directly affected, they would like to have some input into decisions, and being able to express their opinions and ideas is very, very beneficial. The final management style that we need to go through is a laissez-faire management style. So laissez-faire is the least decentralized. And so we've been through them in order from most centralized to least centralized. This is one where managers outline the time frame and the budget. So they'll say to employees, you have 6 months and $100,000 to complete this task. But other than that, the employee has full control over what decisions are made in order to complete the job by that time and using the funds allocated. So employees have a great deal of control over decisions. And so we call this a decentralized decision making again, because employees are able to have input in decisions. It is essentially two-way communication, but more technically, it's horizontal communication, because rather than having that formal hierarchy within the business of employers and employees and employers are seen as equal. And employers respect their employees enough to give them all this control and delegate a lot of tasks to them. So one main benefit of a laissez-faire management style is that employees have a lot of control and therefore they're more motivated, and it improves corporate culture within the business. They feel respected and they feel rewarded by their manager. It also encourages teamwork and creativity and innovation between employees, because employees can collaborate and help each other, finish their tasks. And so it's really well suited to creative industries. Apple, Google, all those kind of tech industries use a laissez-faire management style, because when you have a lot of, when an employee has a lot of scope to make their own decisions, it allows for creative thinking rather than being told exactly what to do. A weakness, though, is that for some employees, having all this control and authority can lead to a loss of motivation and productivity, especially when they're not monitored regularly and having regular checks and feedback by a manager. So it can lead to a loss of resources and a waste of time in some instances. But for the most part, it's a very beneficial management style, especially, as we said, for those creative kind of industries. And it's most suited to instances where they're long-term decisions, that might have 6 months to complete. And also when your employees are very highly skilled, because then they're able to complete tasks without being controlled by their manager. And the final thing to go through is our management skills. So these are some definitions of each. And these are things that will come up again and again. It's good to have a definition of each and start to think about how each management style would use each of these skills. We've already been through some of these in relation to management styles, such as communication and decision-making, but you can also think about how delegation might be used in an autocratic management style, which would be very minimal, versus a laissez-faire management style, where a manager would delegate a lot of skills and authorities to the employees to complete. Same with leading, how that would be used in a different management style will vary between how it's centralized or decentralized. So good to have definitions of each of these. Communication skills are exchanging information, either top-down or two-way, which we've been through. Delegation is when the manager provides authority and tasks to employees. Planning is decisions which are made for the future. Leading is when the manager guides employees to achieving business objectives. Decision making is choosing between alternatives. And interpersonal skills is the way in which communication is presented and information is exchanged to employees. So if you're going to fire employees, is it better to scream at them or tell them in a more sympathetic, calm way so that they don't, get scared and, get really emotional? And so it's really good to have a definition of each of these. I know that I personally found it a bit difficult because you know what planning is, but how do you put it in a nice sentence to define in an exam or a SAT? So these are definitely some things that I would put in your notes. It doesn't require a lot of time or a lot of content in the course, but good just to have some definitions in your notes. And so that brings us to the end of this second lesson. We've now finished the content for the first area study, which is really great. And I hope this video was helpful.